welcome everybody to our February membership meeting. Today, really excited to have our recent graduates join us to talk about their experiences at Northeastern, what drew them to Northeastern, their advice for us as we are continuing to navigate this journey. So before we get started, I would like to go over our agenda of today. So I'll start off by introducing GSERA as well as our leadership team. We have a couple of our leadership team here on call, and introduce our panelists. And then we'll go into the exciting stuff, questions for our panelists. And at the end, we do have time reserved for Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box and we can answer them at the end, or we can just have an interactive discussion at the very end. So GSERA is a student-led organization that provides opportunities for students to collaborate, network, and build community along the doctoral journey. And as you are all joining us today, I'm sure you're part of GSERA. It stands for Graduate Student Education Research Association. We also have a wonderful mentor-mentee program that Chris Vo leads as the program director. And this volunteer program really allows students to connect with other students in the program, to get mentorship, get guidance, and also kind of have an accountability buddy as you go through this journey together. And if you're interested, you can follow us at any of our social links below. We have LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, as well as our Engage page. Okay, so for our GSERA leadership, we have Sherry, our president, Jennifer, vice president, Taylor, secretary, I am the treasurer, and Chris is our program director. Okay, and for our panelists today, I will be our facilitator. I have not yet graduated, so I'm really excited to learn from all of our panelists today who will be walking in May of 2025. We have Dr. Fatima Koura, Dr. Matthew Ezzo, and Dr. Michelle Zottoli-Lee. I will now allow our panelists to do a self-introduction. Dr. Fatima, could you please start?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for organizing this. Little background by myself is that I just graduated with my defense in November, and I have a undergraduate degree in English, went on got my master's in women's studies, and now completed my doctorate in education. And I currently teach at a community college. I teach English and I teach speech.
Thank you, Fatima. And next we have Dr. Matthew Ezzo.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Matt is fine, unless you're my mom, then you can call me Matthew, but happy to be here. Mel, thanks a lot for a great introduction and appreciate everyone attending the meeting. So Matt Ezzo here. I'm in sales. I am in the med tech space, and I work for a large global healthcare company called Abbott. I'm in their diabetes care division. And we make products based around continuous glucose monitoring, which is some really amazing technology out there to help people who have diabetes. As far as education goes, I actually started off with a criminal justice background in my undergraduate, and then got into sales, and then went and got my MBA, and then now here. I've just recently successfully defended just a couple weeks back. So, you know, happy to be through the program and happy to have survived the defense. It's actually not that bad, trust me. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Dr. Michelle Zottoli-Lee.
Thank you. So again, I just want to say thank you for organizing this. So I have lots and lots of degrees. And so when my superintendent encouraged me to get my doctoral degree, I was like, sure, why not? I actually started with a BS in finance and worked in New York City for not even a year. And I was like, I can't do this the rest of my life, and quit my job and went back to school to be a teacher. So I have a master's, I have a CAGS, I have a CAS, which is a degree just past that, or before the CAGS, but I was an elementary school teacher, principal, and my superintendent encouraged me to get my doctoral degree, and I was like, of course. So I just defended in October.
Wonderful. Congratulations to you all. How exciting to be here with so many doctors, and also soon to be doctors, hopefully for the rest of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it's really exciting that we have such a diverse panel because we have people representing the K-12 space, higher education, as well as the business side. So really excited to hear from, all three panelists today, like what drew you to the program, your learnings and takeaways from the program, and how you plan to, what your next steps are after this program. So without further ado, we'll go into the shared experiences, the discussion part. So I'll stop sharing my screen so we can actually see each other's faces. And the first question I have will be for all panelists, and maybe Fatima, you can start off. I'm wondering what drew you to Northeastern's program, and did the program ultimately provide you with the resources that you intended and was seeking for?
That's a great question. I applied for the program in 2021. 2020. I got in 2021. It was middle of COVID, and I was like, I'm going to apply to this doctoral program. What drew me the most was that it was remote, and also it was self-paced, that I didn't need to be with a cohort. I'm a mom of 4 kids. I mean, I also work. I needed something that was going to fit into my schedule. I didn't expect what I experienced at Northeastern, the community, the friendships that I made, the courses, and also the professors that I met throughout the program. But it was, for me, it worked well with my schedule, and I'm glad that I went through this program.
Awesome. I think that virtual aspect really drew me as well because I live abroad in Asia, but I wanted to go to university in the States. So I was looking for a virtual program that would allow me to do so. And this has definitely been really beneficial and allowed me to pursue a higher degree while not being physically in the States. Matthew, what drew you to Northeastern?
Yeah, a lot of the same things, right? I mean, I grew up in this area, in the Boston area, so I'm native here. I always had an affinity for schools in the city. I went sort of on the outskirts of the city in my undergraduate, but never in the city, and always sort of dreamed of, attending a school right in the heart of Boston, which is where Northeastern is, of course. So pretty cool, from that perspective. Also the remote, thing, asynchronous learning, it fit. Getting a higher degree, a higher education, or a terminal degree in this case, but being able to do it in that fashion was really helpful, right? Because like I mentioned in the intro, I work for Abbott. I think most of us are working. We can't just show up to the university all day, every day to, focus on school full time. So, that was a big draw as well.
Thank you. And Michelle?
So for me, I already had a degree in educational leadership. And so I was looking for a program that could help me, even though I'm not teaching, sort of enhance that aspect of teaching. And Northeastern was one of the few schools that had innovative teaching and learning. And so I was able to focus on that aspect of it. And so, of course, it enhanced my leadership, but it also helped me to stay relevant and current in the teaching practices so I can better support my teachers and ultimately the students. The other piece of it was really like, although it's a remote program, like I live 10 miles from Northeastern. So for me, like all of the other benefits were here too, like residency and things like that. So just the convenience of being local just helped also.
Awesome. Were any of you guys familiar with the experiential learning aspect or what action research was prior to the start of the program?
So we have action research in education, and it's a term that we use, and we sort of take a problem and teachers will dive into it, into like, this is a problem I have in teaching or the kids learning, and like, what can I research and what can I put in place? And so we did like mini little things, but never anything to like the scale of what we did in this program, which was amazing to see.
Yeah, I was not familiar with action research. I mean, coming from a business background, I wasn't doing any research over there. Research, we see it from a clinical perspective come in and we use it, in our sales cycles when we're talking to physicians or other healthcare professionals about, these products, but this was my first, adventure, I would say, into it, and I found it really, really interesting. I mean, action research is what it is, right? The word action is in it. It's not just, academic research. We must, take action and come up with solutions to real world problems, which I think is the coolest part of it.
I believe in the personal statement, they asked also a problem you're going to solve. And I think that also was one of the questions that or something that drew me to this program, was that I knew that I was going to work on something that was my interest and I was going to focus on that.
And Michelle, you mentioned residency earlier as a key area that kind of impacted your experience. So I'm wondering, what were some of your key takeaways from the residencies that you attended in Boston?
So the very first residency was my very first class, and it was like the first week into class. And like the first week you're still sort of like figuring things out. And so it was great because I got to residency, I met people that were actually in my class, and I met people that had been through the classes, and they just gave me a ton of advice and suggestions. And I feel like that first sort of round of classes, I was getting my head back into like what it was like to be a student. And so I got so many practical, just helpful hints and tips. And just, I met one person, and she wasn't even my mentor, but just we sort of like, I don't know, I think she felt sorry for me because I was so lost in what I was doing. But she ended up being somebody that like would just text me every couple months and be like, hey, how are you doing? Here's something I learned that's going to be really helpful for you down the road. And so I think for me, it just sort of helped me realize how important the community was and how important it is to tap into others and to like use others and ask questions and also be a resource for others too.
Absolutely. I attended the Seattle residency a quarter into my experience, and that was really valuable as well, because especially since, I live abroad, I didn't know who was in the program at all. So it's awesome to be able to connect with some folks in person. Fatima, do you have any stories from residency that you'd like to share?
Yes, actually, the previous president of GSERA, Dennis Soros, we had taken a few courses together at Northeastern, and then we met that morning of my first residency, and we created a group of friends, and we connect often, maybe like once every 2 weeks, just us friends. We text each other back and forth. One of the friends we made during that residency was graduating that year, and she came to visit from Boston to New Jersey and with her kids, and we spent the weekend together. That's how close we've become, and we still connect. And someone's defending, we're there, we're congratulating that person, and a lot of us are graduating this May together, so it's an exciting time. So
That is so special.
yeah.
What were some activities that were facilitated at residency that you feel like allowed you to really connect and bond with one another?
That first residency that I went to, they had a bowling event, and that's where we actually ended up being in the same lane and talked to, and we got to know each other even more.
Yeah, and we have shout out to the residency that's going to be happening March in Seattle. So if anybody's going there, please have fun. I don't think our leadership board will be there, but Seattle should be a great time. So my next question is about tools. So tools you wish you had adopted earlier, or tools that you played with but didn't end up using. Matt, would you like to begin?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the biggest tool, I think, for me that I want to talk about, there's two of them, but I mean, for me, it's really, it's NVivo, right? And I would say, to anybody, really, really think about this, from a coding perspective to check into it. The one thing I do wish, though, is that I started familiarizing myself with it a little bit earlier. because there is a little bit of a learning curve, but I spent $100 to hire one of 21 platinum elite trainers in the entire world to give me a 1 hour session on it. And, it was the best $100 I ever spent. So, there's a lot of free tools. The software is free. Northeastern gives it to you, right? But then they don't train you on how to use it. There's not a lot of help in that area. So I found I had to go out and sort of, get my own help. But I'll tell you what, like again, and I'll drop his information. Ben Meehan was who I use. He's in Ireland. He's phenomenal. If you want to try something like that, or hey, you can feel free to drop me, some questions as well, and I'll certainly do my best to answer them. But in vivo, is a coding software. First and foremost, it is it's a genius tool. Not only does it provide a complete audit trail on every single thing you do from your research, it's a place to house all of your transcripts, right? So this tool, there's a lot to it. I won't explain a ton, but basically, imagine dropping in all your transcripts. You're doing coding. Let's say you're doing more than 10. I think this tool is much more, significant if you have a lot of participants, right? If, 10 is the minimum, but, I had 16, for example. So 16 transcripts to go through and code. It houses all of them in one spot. So from a quote perspective or a coding perspective, you can use it to look up anything anybody said, right? Just by words. Like out of all my 16 transcripts, for example, I want to know every spot in all 16 transcripts where somebody mentioned the phrase, I love education. I'm making that up, of course, but and in boom, in 1 second, I will have all the cuts from every one of the 16 transcripts on where the participants were talking about that specific thing. Similarly, a lot of folks don't know this too. You can drop your whole entire literature review right in vivo. Every single article that you have, and you can search your literature the same way. And then you can make connections between your interview transcripts and your lit review. For example, where is your literature talking about the subject of education and training? When do your participants talk about that? It'll bring it all up and you can make those ties. When you're looking for quotes, and you will be looking for quotes, right? When you're writing your dissertation, you'll be looking for a lot of quotes, across, in my case, 16 different transcripts. Where are all these quotes? Where were they talking about this? Where were they talking about that? I needed to pull quotes sometimes on things I didn't know I was going to need to pull quotes from. I just simply went into the software and typed up, a search, and I had things at my fingertips to copy and paste into my dissertation from my participants. And then lastly, there's visualizations in there, graphs, charts. It does stuff for you, like that is just amazing. So, I would say take advantage of that tool. And again, I'll drop Ben Meehan's information into the chat if you guys want an expert on the subject to get some consultation. The other thing I'll just mention from a tool perspective is Zotero. Get organized early and often. This is a place to keep all of your, citations. And then when you're in Word, when you're in your dissertation and you're looking to cite, all you simply do is, bolt on the Zotero add-on. It will do all your citations for you, just like that. It's so amazing. And then when it's time to do your bibliography, you simply hit a button and your references are simply just imported for you perfectly in APA 7. It's a dream. And then, as you go along over time, and continue writing and continue adding citations, you simply hit a refresh button and it updates your bibliography for you. So those are the tools that I wanted to share. I would say to anybody, please take advantage of those tools. It'll make your life so much easier. Thank you.
Amazing. When were you introduced to them? And I mean, you talked about the learning curve for in vivo, but do you feel like there's also a learning curve for Zotero? And when you adopted them, what was that transition kind of like?
Yeah, not so much for Zotero. There's a few different ones out there like Zotero, EndNote, and in the beginning they try to hook you up, I think, with the head of the library who can give you some insights on some of these things. The learning curve was pretty easy with that. Yeah, I found just Once you start using Zotero and you're online, for example, and you're looking up an article, the little Zotero button just sits right at the top of your screen, right? You can just import it. You hit it and boom, it's like done. It's magic. It's beautiful. With NVivo, there's much more of a learning curve. So I would just say, don't wait like I did. I was in R3, the start of R3, and I was like, oh, yeah, let me just take on NVivo at the same time during my data collection. I wouldn't recommend doing that because there is a little bit of a learning curve, right? So, get after it early, play around with it, mess with it, and get yourself, prepared before you start doing your data collection and importing transcripts. It'll make your life a lot easier.
Definitely. I'm in R3.5 right now, and now is when I'm trying to pick up NVivo, and I just feel so behind already as I'm trying to pick it up. So I definitely wish I was introduced to it earlier or had spoken to you, Matt, about this.
Well, I'm going to drop Ben Meehan's information into the chat, and I'll tell you one thing Ben did for me is he took control of my screen during our consultation session because I had trouble trying to set up a couple things, and he was like, "Look, let me just get in here and do this real quick," right? So I got a little bit of hands-on help too, which was really, really beneficial.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And Michelle, any tools or practices that you used during your doctoral journey that
So I
made it
saw
really
Sherry added in the chat. I used the Mendeley. It was basically like Zotero, but it was just another version for all of the citations. And it was great because as I would search things on Google Scholar, I could just it automatically add them to there. And so ultimately it housed all my articles. You can add little like blurbs in there to help with things. And that was just a huge tool. At the residency, people had told me about different versions, so I started right away. And so, again, that was one of the things, like from my first few classes, like everything went into there. And so everything was housed in one location. And I would just use the add-ons in Word and just put it in. And I never had to think twice about like, did I use the right APA format or anything? The other thing, and I think Melody, I shared it with you, was in one of my classes, someone showed us a Google extension for highlighting. And so they showed us how in Google you can use the different highlight features and it will automatically sort them for your coding. And so I did all of my coding. I wasn't like Matt, I wasn't willing, I didn't have the time to like take on anything new. So I just used what I had and I would just go through and I'd use like 10 different colors and then it would just filter it and put all those things together for me. And then from there, I was able to sort of go through and then if I would cut and paste it and put it in a different doc and take away the filters and then do it again. So like each doc became a new sort of filter on it and it would go through my cycles of coding. And so that was a huge tool. I think another one that I learned about also is as an elementary principals, I have sort of like set timeframes and they're like deadlines that I can't miss. And so I got a 3-month calendar and put it on the wall and I put my school calendar on it and then the class calendar. And so I would also put like, when did we have no school? And I conveniently sometimes had to be sick to get something done, but like it was all laid out. And like I knew when papers were due or projects were due. And like I could see like, oh, that's going to be a busy week at work and that project's due. And okay, I can figure out how to get it done. And that was a huge tool that somebody had shared with me. I mean, I know it's so old school, but just having it out and like different colors on the one big calendar, like I couldn't miss anything.
I think that highlight tool is so good. Yeah, if you have the YouTube link, maybe you can also drop it in the chat box for everyone. I think it's a great video. And that's why I love GSERA because I get connected with so many people who have already gone through the program. And this is where I'm actually getting the resources and support that I feel like it's like the practical insights that I need to move along with the journey. So Fatima, I'd love to ask you, what were some interactions that you had with either peers, faculty, advisors, or the greater community that you felt like was really helpful during your doctoral journey?
Yeah, the peer community was really important for me. to continue with the program, emotional support, but also assignments. I would reach out to friends. If there's an assignment I needed, like just some advice, or like you said, in vivo, getting some background information on that and how to use it. Just reaching out, I could text somebody or email somebody quickly and get some feedback, but an insight. The peer community was really important, and also GSERA. I met Matt through GSERA, and we became friends through this program, through the mentorship program. And I met Jen, I met other students, and this has been fulfilling for me, and meaningful to be part of this.
Absolutely. I think GSERA's been huge. I think another thing for me personally that has been helpful is when there's mandatory Zoom discussion sessions in place of discussion board responses, because sometimes those could feel a little bit removed and you're kind of just doing it as a task to respond to somebody else. But this one class where the professor required us to meet in person once a week, and that was awesome because I was able to meet new folks because of that. And I think every 3 or 4 weeks we would switch groups. And so I met a couple new friends through that program or through that course.
Definitely. I went to I tried to make it to every minute, like even if it's optional meetings. I was there, and that's where I met a few of the students, and also I got great advice. One student had mentioned, and I stayed after. They were just just chatting, a couple of students after the meeting was over, and someone mentioned about transferring credits from other programs or certificates you've completed into the program, and I didn't know about that. And if I didn't just stay behind in the meeting just to listen, I wouldn't know that I could transfer my 9 credits from a program that I've done a few years ago. And that was a great opportunity for me to have those 9 credits be transferred into Northeastern. So just listening in and making those connections was really important for me.
Oh, absolutely. That's so much time and money saved.
Yes, and also from those meetings that I had, and just getting to know each other outside of just staying after or coming into meetings a little early, and those same people we meet just as friends on Zoom once in a while, besides the group that I made friends with, but also other friends that like groups that were created through the classrooms that we would meet just for support until each of us defended.
And then my final question before we jump into the Q&A will be, what advice would you give to current students? So you can respond to either at a specific stage in time, whether it be R1, 2, 3, or the defense, or their interaction with professors, their chair, anything. Michelle, would you like to begin?
Sure. I think the biggest piece of advice I would give is, if you sort of have an idea of what your problem of practice is going to be, trying to focus on projects that build it along the way. Because I found that as I was writing my dissertation, and the last section is about like recommendations, like I was going back to different papers that I wrote, and I was like, oh, that's where this fits in, and that's where this fits in. And so a lot of the pieces sort of like, if you think about it, can fit together in your work that you're doing along the way, especially because like a lot of the classes I took were about curriculum and things like that. They all sort of like had a place in the dissertation at the end. And so things that I was like, oh, I'll never do this again, I was like, wait a minute, where's that project? And so thinking about how things, even if at the time they don't seem like they build, those little pieces of knowledge ultimately will come together. And so even, I tend to try to keep things organized just because I have so much going on, but knowing like where that project was and what resources I used, because I could go back to Mendeley and even pull up the articles, like, was huge. And then they all sort of streamlined together. And I would say, like, taking advantage of like anything that the chair offers. Like my chair would have like monthly like check-ins, and so I would go and I would learn from other people. my chair was also new at the time, so she was sort of learning, but it was like this big learning process together. And I think, just being able to ask questions was huge too. So I guess my advice is, all the pieces do fit together. I know I think it might have been R1 or F1, you do something and you have to pick like a theory to write about. And so it ended up that I did something on adult learning. Well, adult learning ended up being huge in my dissertation because it ended up being part of the transfer process and why what I found, my findings were applicable to other settings. And so things like that seem like an assignment to get you to learn things can actually be really practical in the end, when you sort of see the big picture.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle.
I wanted to add to that about the problem of practice, because I think a lot of the work is done in isolation. And one thing that I learned, besides working, the research and the writing, is that talking to people outside of Northeastern or just people in my community, because this is an action step, and I felt like I needed to hear and listen and see what's needed. And speaking to people, I learned so much about other ideas when it came to recommendations or later work that could be conducted in our research. He listening to what other people's advice and maybe a resource they gave me was helpful outside of the confines of Northeastern. That was really helpful for me to listen in. And so talking was, and I feel that I think one of the professors that I listened to at Northeastern had said that you're going to get a more opportunity to talk about your work than someone actually reading your work. So talking was a critical part for me.
That is so true. Like, who is going to actually read through your whole dissertation, right? So find different avenues to share the stories and findings from your research that you spent 3+ years on. Matt?
Yeah, I would say here's my advice. I think the question was sort of originally posed year 1, year 2. So I've got a couple thoughts on that. So I think in the beginning, I would say this: begin with the end in mind, right? When you're starting out, take the time to review what the dissertation template actually looks like. What is your final product? Don't wait all the way until you get to the point where you have to download the dissertation template to look at it for the first time. Take a good look. I would also say read an exemplar. Read someone's dissertation. It's something I didn't do in the beginning, but I really wish that I had, right? To really understand what this final project is going to look like. Because then as you're going along, you'll see through the courses that you're taking, you'll see where you need to put your effort. You'll see what's most important in the dissertation is the final product, right? For example, like positionality, for example. I'm not saying that it's not important, right? It's important to reflect and it's important to go through that. But take a look at what the positionality section looks like in the dissertation. It's a paragraph, guys. It's 2 paragraphs if you want to really get out there, right? So like understanding things like that end product in mind, I think is sort of important where you can put your focus on going through it. Because you need a vision. You need like a vision for your project. I would say like do that in the beginning. My advice for a chair, like, GSERA is great. You're going to get support here. You're going to get some really, really great information. But your chair in this program is your ride or die, right? And I think picking your chair, going back on my experience, I am ultimately super happy with my chair. But like Michelle, my chair was new. So you've got some decisions to make. Don't just make a quick choice because someone's available, because there are chairs in this program that have gone through and gotten their doctorate at Northeastern themselves. But there are chairs that haven't gotten their doctorate at Northeastern. There are chairs that you'll find that have taught all the courses, R1, R2, R3, R4. They've taught them and they're intimately familiar with the courses. Then there are chairs that haven't taught any of those yet. And that makes a big difference in your journey, right? I think Michelle and I had a similar experience, right? We we went through it with our chairs, right? My chair was teaching R1 for the first time when I was already in R2. I was giving my chair as much information as my chair was giving me, in the beginning, and I felt like it was definitely this this relationship of reciprocity. But I tell you that story to say it's not good or bad. It's just kind of, what do you want, right? So think about it. I think, for year 2, I would say this: just focus on solid data collection, right? Make sure you do some meaningful work, quality, interviews, and really, really focus on getting good data, because it's everything. It's what, your study, it's what you're going to code. It's what you're going to get, your evaluation from and your meaning from. So really spend the time and take the time to do that right. And I would offer you just one more tip. I know that Northeastern, puts out the Johnny Saldana book on coding. I would offer you an alternative to that. I've said this before. Take a look at Braun and Clark. Take a look at Braun and Clark's 6 steps of reflexive thematic analysis in a way to code. So you may feel like I felt looking at Saldana's book when you get into coding and you're starting to do your data collection and analysis, that boy, there's a lot. Wow, it's a lot there, and it can be confusing. So I would just offer that piece of advice, Braun and Clark.
Can I add on to Matt for a second? Matt, you mentioned chairs. One thing that I didn't realize until the proposal defense is that every chair had a co-person they worked with, or a co-chair. And the co-chair, or that other person, brings a lot of weight to the process. And the person that I had, very, very knowledgeable, definitely had her own sort of take on things. And she really wanted some things in my dissertation, and they were not part of my study. And so I realized how much influence she had, that when I actually went to write my final dissertation, I made sure that I wrote about the things she wanted in there from the perspective of why they didn't fit in it. So she couldn't tell me that they had to be there. So I think, when you think about your chair, you also want to think about who's going to be that other person, because they do have a lot of influence. And so you want to make sure that if they're on the same page, that's great. And if they're not, like, what can you do to make sure that you're addressing that too?
Awesome. Thank you all so much. These are super valuable insights, and I'm definitely going to be checking out that book, as well as all of the other links that have been dropped in the chat box. So thank you guys so much. Let's go into Q&A then. Any questions from the audience? Feel free to just go on unmute yourselves to ask questions, because we have a small group.
I'll go first. So the whole co-chair idea is really fascinating to me, because I've got a fantastic chair, but I also would love to have like another pair of eyes, someone who's an expert in AI, right? So that way I can just write a much better dissertation and stuff like that too. But how does that process work?
I can take that from what I know. From my understanding, every chair is so you'll have a second reader, which is like the co-chair, and then you'll have a third reader. So the third reader is somebody that you'll select. So my third reader happened to be my assistant superintendent. The second chair, or the co-chair, every chair has a partner. So they're already sort of matched up. So like I didn't have I had Dr. Crystal, and then Dr. Khan works with Dr. Crystal. So if you have Dr. Khan, then you're going to be working and have Dr. Crystal as a second chair. Like Dr. Anderson works with Dr. what's his name? Unger. And so if you have Dr. Unger, you're going to work with Dr. Anderson. And so that's how they do like the first and the second. And then the third chair or the third reader is the person that you'll bring on. And it's somebody that's has a doctoral degree, has been in the field. And so you'll bring in somebody that you think will be able to support your research or have insight to your research, or, you know, somebody along those lines.
Cool. No, thank you. Thank you for that.
And actually, Chris's question dovetails very nicely into, because I had actually wanted to ask about that third reader and kind of what insights you have, the three of you have, about the process you went through to choose to recruit your third reader, and then you know, did you use that person as kind of a critical friend and a content expert throughout the dissertation, or did you sort of keep them walled off so that they came to the document fresh? It's you know, I'm sort of like, I just got mine recruited earlier today via text, but now I need to figure out how to deal with them.
I'll jump in on that one. So Sherry, for me, at least my experience was, and again, to Michelle's point, they have to have a doctorate. So, you know, you got to start there. It can't
Yep.
just be someone that you like or someone that you know is an expert in the field. So once, you know, they're qualified from having a doctorate perspective, you know, then I would choose somebody that, you know, if you can find someone that you know that you can work together with, which is what I did. So, you know, my dissertation, my research was done in the community pharmacy practice, right? And so at Abbott, I found a medical science liaison who I know is a colleague, who is a PharmD, who is licensed in all 50 states, believe it or not, and was willing to help me with this project. And we did collaborate quite a bit. You know, I was able to run some thoughts, you know, by Dr. Rosenke. You know, hey, I was thinking about this for my solution. What do you think? Am I nuts? Is this, you know, give me a sanity check on this. You know, when it came time to do my intervention, a little bit different being in the business world and being under the regulations that we're under. My intervention was done on a medical device, you know, teaching pharmacists how to use a medical device in the real world that they were then going to go and actually talk to patients about at their pharmacy. So when I set up my intervention, I needed another set of eyes on that. I needed to make sure it was compliant. So I brought her in to consult. We kind of went through that stuff together. Just to make sure that what I was doing was robust, it was compliant, it was right. So yeah, I had a little bit more of a collaborative effort going on in my experience, and I thought it was good.
I had my assistant superintendent, so everything I had to do had to be approved. So my superintendent and assistant superintendent were kind of in the background along the whole process, because we had to figure out, would it be just at my school or would it be district wide? And so like they were part of things, but never really like entrenched in it. And I sort of kept it that way because they were so busy. I brought in for part of my research an educational expert. So a teacher that I worked with, he has his PhD and is actually a professor down in, I forget what school. He'd probably kill me right now, but I brought him as my expert. And so Dr. Dana Robertson from, I think it's West Virginia or Virginia Tech, no, Virginia Tech. He was my educational person. And so I used him for sort of that springboard. I had to do some training. I shared my slides with him. He gave me feedback on them. He's an expert in reading professional development for teachers. So he gave me feedback from both his expertise and then from what I was doing. So I had both. And then that way I could sort of tap in where I felt like I needed it. But then I always felt like I was bothering people. So like having two different resources, I didn't feel like I was tapping into one person too much.
Super helpful.
For me, I met my third reader through my chair. She introduced us, and I shared my work with her, but my third reader didn't come in. My second reader also didn't really read my work till towards the end of before I defended. So they gave me feedback then, but my third reader did research on similar work that I was working on. So her feedback was constructive. Actually, all my chairs gave me good feedback, but my third reader specifically had done work on. I reached out to somebody that I knew that had done work on similar work that I was researching. And that was helpful because I get that constructive feedback.
So I'm wondering, what is the connection between the dissertation work that you all have done with your professional practice? So what's next now that you're all doctors? What do you have planned?
I can go first if you want. So I think my work was really about, for me, learning how to just support my teachers better. And so I'm always up for, I feel like every teacher is so different. And, I have teachers that have been teaching for 30 years and teachers that are in their first year of their practice. And so I think for me, I learned a lot of strategies and how to support them, and also how to help them to support themselves. And so I just want to continue to sort of share that. And this is going to sound so crazy, but for me, like, I don't want to be a superintendent. Like my superintendent knows that. Like I am happy being a principal. So like I'm in the position I want to be in. And I really sort of looked at this degree as like my next step for when I retire. And when I retire, because in teaching you can retire a little bit earlier, I want to use this as an opportunity to go and teach part-time at a university or at a college. And so I've been a principal now for 14 years. So I have that wealth of experience. And then this will help me eventually get to that next step of being a part-time professor somewhere. So that's where, but I really looked at it from the perspective of, for here and now, it's how do I learn skills to make and support the staff and the students at my school and help them to continue to grow.
That's beautiful.
I'll go next. For me, I applied to this program because I wanted to do work that was focused on my interest, which is working with Muslim students. And that's my research. My dissertation was on working with Muslim women students on college campuses and creating healing spaces for them. And I work at a community college at the moment, and I'm really happy with my position where I am right now, but I am looking for a university job. And I also, I'm going to be presenting on this work at a few conferences coming up. So I'm excited about the next steps about presenting and also publishing some of the work that I've written about.
Good luck.
Thank you.
For me, it's been an interesting journey. I've presented the findings of my research to my company, which, so the education intervention that I proposed was actually it was the first of its kind done in community pharmacy. It used virtual reality as a training modality for med tech devices, but in the pharmacy setting itself. And so, now I find my research, I'm trying to sell it, right? I'm trying to sell the idea. I'm trying to get support for it. I want my company to pick it up and make a greater investment in it because the results showed that it was beneficial, right? It shows that it was effective. It showed that patient care, the value chain for patient care will increase at a pharmacy if trained using this modality on these devices. So, to that end, I want to get the word out there. Fatima mentioned getting published. I will say that's not super easy. I'm finding a couple tidbits on that. I took the rubric. Each journal, in case you may not know, each journal has its own rubric, right? So, the abstract in one journal has to be 250, and it's got these sections, and you can only use two tables and one figure, for example. So you do that. You take your dissertation that's 150, a couple hundred pages, wherever you're at, and you figure out a way to concise it into a journal article, get it concise into an article, and follow all those guidelines. And then so I went out and I, went shot for the moon. I went for the Journal of the American Pharmacists Association, biggest publication for pharmacists, right? And I got rejected. And so I was like, I thought they were going to love this. I thought this was going to be so exciting. Well, they didn't pick it up. So I said, okay, well, I guess I just got to go to the next journal. Well, the problem with that, or the challenge with that, is now you look at the next journal and see the rubrics completely different. See, instead of being APA 7, this one was AMA, right? Here's the hook for Zotero again, though. Watch this when you get ready to publish. I was like, oh no, this journal wants my article in AMA, not APA 7. I went into the Word document in Zotero and I literally just hit a button and it flipped my entire article from APA 7 to AMA in less than 2 seconds and did the bibliography for me in less than 2 seconds. So there's another hook for using some of these tools, guys. But then, the next journal is, only an X number of figures and tables, but it's got different sections and the length of the sections are different and so on and so forth, right? So I'm on my third trip now here, trying to get published. But yeah, that's part of it, right? To get the information out there so that, I want someone to pick this up, whether it's my company or someone else. And I've got some support. I am getting advocacy now. I'm finding that you sort of need that if you want your research to go somewhere. You can't just carry that torch all by yourself. So I'm using my third reader who's influential in the market, who's influential in industry. And now my third reader has gotten a few people to read my journal article, and I've got this little network now that's going. So I'm hopeful to take that, and use that power between publishing and networking to try to actually, do something with the research.
That's awesome. Good luck to you all, and congratulations on all of the success that you've already had. And yeah, good luck on spreading the word and continuing to make an impact through all of the research that you've done. We are coming to an end, so I wanted to see if there's any last minute questions before we wrap up.
I have a closing comment that I want to make. I was cleaning out my office today, and you wouldn't want to know what that office looked like after all these years. But, now that it's post-defense, it was time to, take the 4 billion articles and pieces of paper and highlighters and just, wow, I actually wish I had a picture of this. And I thought I was going to throw out a lot of stuff, but I started going back and looking at a lot of these articles that I printed off. And I labeled them all, R1, F1, F2, so on and so forth. And I found something in the million articles that were there. It was highlighted, and heading into the meeting, I grabbed it for today, and it was from F2. And this is how I view, or why I think GSERA is important, because this is a community of practice. And it was an article called Understanding Community by Vogel from 2016. And Vogel defines community as a group of individuals who share a mutual concern for one another's welfare. And Vogel talks about it's different than a group. A group might just have members that share ideas and interests, but they lack a true concern for one another. And that's why this community practice is different. And so I just want to thank you guys for helping form this. This is really, 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 significant, I think, in the journey for doctoral students. We are a community of practice. We do care about one another at a different level. We're not just a group. So, thank you guys for helping make that all a reality.
What a way to wrap up. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you so much, Fatima, for joining, as well as everybody who's on the call today. Before we end, I do want to share our March events that are going to be happening. So March 5th, we have a power hour. Basically, it's just a working session to keep each other accountable, make sure we're getting those final assignments in. We have our next membership meeting, March 18th. It will be a faculty student joint event where we'll be talking about how to attack the dissertation proposal and defense. And it will be another panel discussion. And finally, March 29th, we have a Seattle residency. So if you're there, take photos and send them to us. And yeah, if you're not already part of GSERA, please join us on Engage. And that's a wrap for today's session. Thank you all so much for joining. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye, y'all.
Take care.